We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest on the interview series, Imani Payne. She is the Principal Consultant at the People Design House. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name, like you said, Imani Payne. My use she, her, hers pronouns. I work as a principal consultant at the People Design House. I recently transitioned into this role from working in-house at Peak Design, based out of the Bay Area, working as the head of people there. So funny. Okay, I was kind of a peculiar child. So what did I want to be when I grew up? I think, like, to answer that question most honestly, I'd probably have to say I wanted to be Oprah when I grew
Yes.
up. I was a super curious child. I was like often told I was wise beyond my years, which I really think just meant like I got along better with adults than kids, and like trying to make me feel better about that. I often heard as a child to like that my curiosity was like borderline going to get me into trouble, right? And so I loved the idea of turning on the TV every day and seeing a successful Black woman being able to ask anybody any question, and people were excited to be there and excited to answer that. And I think that growing up, I of course knew that there was only one Oprah, and I never quite figured out like how I would be able to get there. But I actually think, and as I was reflecting on this question, looking back on it, like there is really no better fields. Well, maybe I should say HR, I think, is one of the best fields to get into for people who are extremely curious, borderline nosy, and like to solve people's problems.
Borderline nosy. I love that. I love that answer as well. I think it's so interesting to see who are our role models as kids. Where did we think we would be as well? And I'm a huge Oprah fan too. Fast forward Absolutely. To today, it's in the kind of title. It's a lot of what HR and people folks are talking about is this dynamic thing of company culture. What are qualitative and quantitative ways you think about kind of measuring company culture?
It's a great question. So I think qualitatively, of course, in the people function, surveys are a huge way of getting sort of like tapping into what employees are feeling and what they are thinking. Using those sort of engagement surveys, using ENPS scores, using those ways of speaking directly to employees to get a better understanding of what culture, how culture is doing within an organization. One thing that's like super important to consider when thinking about surveys as qualitative feedback is that they're only as useful, right, as the psychological safety within an organization. And also it is just as important to focus on what employees are not saying as what they are saying in those comments on surveys. I think quantitatively, I very much enjoy the people analytics portion of the work that I do. I think that diving into the numbers, diving in to uncover patterns within the organization is really one of the most insightful ways to understand how our on paper culture, right, is showing up in practice within the organization. There are certain things that you can look at during people analytics. While you're analyzing the numbers, I think retention rates, turnover rates, recruiting stats, promotion rates are all really interesting factors to look at. But I also think that it's really important to remember that in the people ops function, we are not responsible really for the movement of those numbers, right? We are responsible for the project management and the tracking of these metrics. And it's really, really up to leadership to set the tone and to change any trends that we notify them to.
Absolutely. I think it's really critical to ask how people are feeling and continue to ask, put that context behind it. Look at the some of the numbers that you talked about as well and help project manage, give advice, provide guidance about how to change those in the future. We know that this is a really critical and kind of unique time as well in terms of the employee experience, the world of work. And there are studies that show one of them is 47% of employees have reported that their stress was just higher than anything they've experienced in their career due to their jobs, but also due to life. And only 37% agreed that their organization really understood what they needed in their personal lives and with their families. How would you really recommend companies show up for employees really in a full way?
That is a fantastic question. And those numbers make me so sad because one of the things that I love most about this career, about this work is that we are able to come into organizations and help founders, help leaders see their employees as whole people. Right? It's so important. At this point, there's just so much research that backs up that a diverse team brings together a more successful organization, right? And if we are asking employees to show up and leave their personal lives at the door, we're really doing ourselves a disservice, right? Within the organization. We need people to be able to feel comfortable showing up as their full selves and bring those lived experiences into the work that they're doing. So at the People Design House, how do we do that? We really help founders focus on inclusion. We help founders really align their mission, vision, and values with the practices that we're seeing within the organization.
Yeah, having that alignment in what you said earlier, kind of what we say or preach on paper, how's that manifesting at an organization? That kind of connection is really important as well. And to make sure that you are kind of getting that feedback, you're asking the questions and getting a response from the team. You need to have an environment that is that has trust and also psychological safety. What are kind of key pillars of a sustainable strategy, especially in a remote setting, to have psychological safety, where building trust might take a little bit longer time, or you need to think about it in a more creative way?
Yeah, so at People Design House, we work mainly with companies in the tech industry, right? So we're working with a lot of companies that have really robust and growing remote teams. And one way that we help founders sort of think about how to create these psychologically safe environments is really kind of thinking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of in the workplace, right? So employees need a sense of surety, a sense of predictability in terms of what that's expected of them and how they're going to show up each day, right? They need to know that they are important to the organization, to feel valued, to feel supported. They need to know that they belong in the organization, that they feel connected and part of the team. That piece I feel like is super, super important when we're thinking about remote work. How do we make employees who are very distributed feel like they're working on a team? And I think that always comes back to, right, having a clear understanding of what the mission is, of what the values are, and making sure that our work is in alignment with that. Also, a sense of like expansion and growth, right? We want to make sure the employees feel like the company is invested in their development. I think all of these things together create a sense of psychological safety that allows employees to show up as their full selves and also voice their opinions, give feedback, right, to the organization. That is super, super helpful in helping them meet those goals.
Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful to understand and really think about as well. How can we intentionally create that psychological safety? You kind of mentioned earlier when we were talking about measuring company culture, kind of the qualitative and the quantitative stats, and HR people teams roles in those as well. And we know that HR people teams have been stereotyped as the principal's office. People are a little nervous when folks from the team join their meetings. And some of it is rooted in the history of the origins of how human resources got started and people's individual experiences as well. Definitely want to acknowledge that. How are you encouraging folks to really take a less traditional approach to HR, people design, and people teams in general?
Yeah, well, I think that at People Design House, we really try to walk the walk and be an example to the companies that we partner with, right? I think, like you're saying, the sort of old school realm of human resources is sort of seen as they see the people within the organization as a liability to be managed, right? Whereas this sort of new age thinking of HR is more of thinking about people as an asset to be valued and to be developed. I think that is like the biggest paradigm shift that I've had in my career, and that I try to impart onto the founders that we partner with. There is no organization without the people within it. And so valuing their experience and valuing their development is one of the best things that a company can do for their business.
Absolutely. People are working with your customers, your clients are working with the product, they are working internally and collaboratively on projects. So they're an essential asset to a company. And also, it's really important to have those conversations and really grow and develop folks as well, and really set people up for success and acknowledge the work that they're doing too. And I think over the past few years, especially, people are thinking about new ways that they can make people feel seen, heard, and understood, looking at processes and saying business as usual doesn't cut it. How can we improve and kind of practice that growth mindset? Can you tell me about how you've redesigned a system to be more equitable when you're in that operator head of people role, whether it's a process, policy, or initiative?
Yeah. So when I was working at Peak Design, I came into the head of people role as the first head of people within the organization. And so I was really working from a deficit and trying to create the structure around the function in order to serve everyone. The people functions touches every single employee within the organization, right? And so one of the first things that I implemented at Peak Design was revamping the entire recruitment process within the organization. There is, a company can set goals for diversity, for equity, for inclusion, for promotion, right? But if they're not taking a proactive stance, a proactive look at how they're recruiting new talent into the organization, you'll always be playing catch up, right? So a few of the things that I implemented within the recruiting process in order to make it a more equitable system was trying to encourage managers, was trying to encourage leaders to put more foresight, right, into the needs of their team and be more proactive in forecasting how their teams were going to grow over the next year, so that I could support them in having a more robust and a more what's the best way of putting this? A more equitable recruiting process, right? We want to make sure that we are not looking for the quickest hire, the one that's closest to us, right? The one that we can see. We want to make sure that we're taking the time to create and level the playing field for all of the potential candidates that are coming to the organization. I think we were really, really lucky at Peak Design that it was a very popular company, that a lot of people reached out to us looking for career opportunities, which is a really wonderful place to be in as a head of people, of course. But that also gave me an opportunity to sort of look ahead, create a catalog of potential team members who could come on board, and then work with the managers to ensure that we were working towards meeting those goals within the team.
Absolutely. I think that is also a great example, because you're starting with the recruitment process, you're starting before someone enters in as an employee as well, and really being intentional about that too. And it does take time. It takes time to build the partnerships and also go outside of our individual networks, our like 6 or 7 degrees of separation as well, when you think about LinkedIn too. I also want to ask too, how have you seen folks kind of more effectively empower folks, no matter what role you have in the organization, if you are on HR, if you are a manager, to really practice equity-driven leadership and really think about how can I really make sure my processes and day-to-day, my interactions are equitable?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Well, mainly because at the People Design House, we partner with organizations, we work directly with founders, and they sort of come to us in sort of 2 buckets, right? There's people who are really committed and understand what equitable leadership is. And then there's people where we have to sort of meet them where they are and help them along and sort of sell the business case, right, for why it's important to think about these things in a certain light. So those are 2 very different modes of working. But I find that that's one of the things that I love most about working at the People Design House, is being able to work with all different kinds of organizations that are at different stages of this sort of process, right? I think that we've seen a huge uptick in the amount of leaders who are committed to the work, who are ready to figure out how to bring more equitable leadership to their teams. And then there's sort of the other side of the coin where there's more traditional, if you will, more traditional leaders who are needing a little bit more support along that journey. We try to reframe perspectives and help founders with the language that they're using within the organization in order to make them more inclusive. One way that we do that is by trying to create safe spaces for them to ask their questions, right? As a leader, people typically look to you to have the answers. And when you don't have the answers on a certain sort of topic, it can be harder to lean into that mode of development. Whereas when you can partner with the People Design House, we are able to give you a space outside of directly reflecting to your employees for you to sort of a sandbox to play in, right? We have lots of examples of how this work can be beneficial to the organization. And then we're a place where people can ask questions and look to us for best practices across the industry.
Absolutely. Looking to you for best practices and guidance. You're right. Every person, every company is at a different part of their equity journey as well. So that reframing, meeting folks where they are is really important as well. And I think that a lot of people are trying to do better. They are kind of looking to innovative and creative solutions to really make sure that they are doing the work and resourcing people to be set up for success. Without naming names, of course, just general trends. Are there any common mistakes you're seeing companies still making in their people strategy? I know you mentioned kind of a few of them as well in terms of not seeing your people as true assets, but anything else that you wanted to share there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in my experience of working with a lot of companies out of Silicon Valley, a lot of companies in the Bay, and tech-driven companies, we have a lot of people who are really, really focused on making the best product possible. And HR, the people operations, is sort of an afterthought. One of the most common mistakes that we see are people committing to this work too late, right? Is accruing this sort of HR debt and then having to dig themselves out of a hole once they realize that their team is ready for rapid growth, right? One of the best things that we can see is when founders prioritize this work from the very, very beginning. So I'd say one of the most common mistakes is starting too late. It's definitely never too late to start, but we find that it's definitely culture happens whether you're intentional about it or not, right? Absolutely. And being intentional about it from the very beginning is a way for you to again create more psychological safety within your organization, because you know that you have a founder who is valuing the people within the organization.
Absolutely. It is never too late to start. It is also never too early to start as well, to make sure that
exactly.
in a organization. I definitely agree with that as well. And in terms of, I guess this is a flip side question, is there an innovation in people, HR, talent, culture that you're excited by, and why? One of my favorites is a 4-day work week, authentic mental health benefits. What are yours?
Yeah, for sure. I am seeing a lot more robust parental leave policies coming across across the country that are more inclusive, that are more equitable. Over the past 2 years, we've seen just a staggering number of women leaving the workforce, and working with companies who are addressing this need, right? Who are again seeing the value of retaining the employees that they have, right, is one of the most exciting things that I have seen. Creating environments where they are giving both robust benefit packages, work autonomy, and flexibility for people to be able to do their work in the best way that suits their families, is something that I'm super excited about. We also seem to work with a lot of companies in the crypto space, right? It's this new emerging space of rapid growth, and we're seeing them try to approach people problems in this new, creative, exciting way. We're seeing a lot of this like DAO model, the decentralized autonomous organization, and trying to figure out how they can challenge the status quo, challenge the more traditional ways of organizing an organization, so that we are able to eliminate some of the things that may not be necessary to the function, right? How can we think more progressively about what it means to manage people, what needs to be repeated each time we have someone new, and how can we sort of create an internal brain so that managers are spending more of their time developing people rather than teaching how to do things, right? Or teaching how employees can, or how managers can spend less time on the sort of organizational needs, if that makes more sense, right? Focusing more on developing people rather than the how-to of the day-to-day of doing a job, right? And we find that the best way for companies who are trying to embrace this sort of DAO model is, again, it comes back to the basics of aligning, of having a clear mission, vision, values that all employees can, then they know that they can repeat, and then they understand how an organization works so they can better focus on doing.
Absolutely. That alignment, again, is so important. It can't be underscored enough too. And culture happens whether you are intentionally thinking or working about it or not. How are your clients really honoring and celebrating? We're in June of 2022. Pride this year, recognizing that we should be supporting LGBTQIA plus employees 365 days a year. And this is definitely related to some of the things we talked about robust parental leave, thinking about how people can be seen, heard, and understood, and things like that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and something that I've already run into. It's only June 3rd, right? And I'm already helping companies sort of approach this in a way that feels authentic to their organization. At the People Design House, we consider ourselves strategic partners with leadership teams and people teams. So we're not coming in to tell you what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, but rather to help you align your policies, help you align your practices with your mission, your vision, and your values. So the number one thing that we explain to organizations, that we explain to companies, is that we really should not be talking the talk until we're ready to be walking the walk, right? If you're going to make a statement, if you're going to speak out on any social issue, it's so important that you have policies, that you have initiatives, that you have financial backing to the things that you're speaking about. And so our role here, right, is to help craft messages that feel authentic to their employees, and also to let organizations know, let people teams know that this is the best time to remind your employees about all of the things that you're already doing to support every walk of life that you have in your organization, or that you serve as a client, right?
Absolutely. You want to make sure that you are remaining authentic. There is teeth behind the statements that you're making, and also you're really supporting folks year round as well. And it's not something that we think about in a silo, but it's related to all parts of the employee experience, all parts of the customer experience too, and who an organization interacts with. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, or maybe underscoring a couple key takeaways you hope people bring with them after hearing our conversation today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've touched on a lot of great things. The kind of areas that I feel like I most want to underscore, right, is the fact that HR debt, culture debt, is a real thing within organizations. You wouldn't let your marketing team get behind. You wouldn't let your engineering team get behind. You recognize the value that those functions bring to your business. And it is just as important to recognize the value that the people ops team brings to your business as well. Like I said, it is never too late to start focusing on culture. It's also never too early to start focusing on culture.
I love that. I think that is really important to remember. And also HR debt, culture debt is very similar to the tech debt. I've been hearing that a lot in these conversations too. It's a strategic part of the business. Imani, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at All Voices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the company to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.